Hi everyone, this is Dr. Chhoda with Ignition Time and welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for making our channel one of the fastest growing channels on personal finance and on information and news about stimulus and unemployment benefits. My goal is to help you reach your American dream. Let's jump right into an interview that US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin did with Fox News and some interesting and some very important comments that he made that tell us exactly where the stimulus negotiations stand right now and where things are headed. Remember, the two lead negotiators on the part of the White House are US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. These individuals have been negotiating with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and with Chuck Schumer in order to be able to come to a consensus. At the moment I'm recording this video, there is no consensus, but it's very clear what the administration's approach is and what moves they're making. In fact, White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows is trying to get Democrats to support a bill that could be potentially introduced in the Senate as early as next week, which is exactly what he said on an interview with CNBC a few hours ago, and I did cover that on my channel. So you want to check out the other video on my channel where I covered what White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows said. Now, before I get into what US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said, I want you to know that we will be covering both sides. We will also be covering House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's perspective in another video on our channel that reveals House Speaker Pelosi's latest comments and latest thought process about where the stimulus negotiations stand right now. Let's jump right into what US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said on Fox News. He said, and I quote, "Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer do not want to negotiate in good faith." He said that they've refused to meet. He said, "We have reached an agreement on many issues, but they said unless we come out with a top line," meaning they are expecting the Democrats want the administration to increase the top line number. Right now, the top line number from the administration is $1.3 trillion. It was $1 trillion. And the Democrats started at $3.4 trillion with the CARES Act, and now they are at $2.4, and then they went down to $2.2 trillion. So the top line number for the administration is $1.3 trillion, and the Democrats are saying, hey, you need to increase your top line number, come closer to us or meet us at $2.2 trillion. And he said that they won't even give us the details as to what they're interested in. So I thought that was interesting. So the US Treasury Secretary is saying that the Democrats are not giving them the breakdown of how this money will be spent. That's what the administration is saying. So he said, again, I think it's bad faith. You know, that's a big deal for the US Treasury Secretary to say that about the House Speaker. So he said that's bad faith. And he said, unfortunately, the president wants us to help with more money for kids and jobs, and we can put over another $1 trillion into the economy quickly. They are at $1.3 trillion actually, because the White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows did say that the president was willing to sign something at $1.3 trillion. Now, keep in mind that the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said that as long as the president and the administration come to a consensus with the Democrats, the Senate Majority Leader would get behind it. So just so that we are clear. He said, US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said, as I've said before, if that's not enough and the Speaker thinks we need to do more, we can always come back and do more. But we're having a great economic comeback. As we've reopened the economy, we're getting more jobs back. There's a lot more to be done. And the president is not done with his work until we get everybody back to work. So again, this is the position of the US Treasury Secretary. Very important comments from US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. Now, there is another side to this because House Speaker Nancy Pelosi does have her own side to this. I've covered that in other videos and I'll be covering that on our channel today. So keep in mind that the Democrats want a comprehensive bill, and there are certain things that, you have to understand their perspective as well. But first, let's listen to the US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and let's roll the tape and watch exactly what he had to say.
Lou, it's great to be back with you. And unfortunately, the Speaker and Senator Schumer just don't want to negotiate in good faith. They've refused to meet. We reached an agreement on many issues, but they said unless we come out with a top line, they won't even give us details as to what they're interested. So again, I think it's bad faith. And unfortunately, the president wants us to help with more money for kids and jobs. And we can put over another $1 trillion into the economy quickly. As I've said before, if that's not enough and the Speaker thinks we needed to do more, we can always come back and do more. But we are having a great economic comeback as we've reopened the economy. We're getting more jobs back, but there's still a lot of work done. The president is not done with his work until we get everybody back to work.
Now, in the second segment of the interview, Mnuchin basically acknowledged that parts of the economy have recovered, but pockets of the economy are still struggling. I've talked about this. We are going through what's called as a K-shaped recovery. Essentially, the rich are getting richer because interest rates are low. The stock market's at an all-time high. The property prices have been going through the roof, and a lot of big companies have been making more and more money, but a lot of individuals unfortunately are getting left behind. So it becomes a K-shaped recovery where some people have recovered, in fact are doing better than they were prior to the pandemic, which is something very few people could have expected when this whole situation unfolded in March and April. But then there are other individuals who've lost their jobs, who don't have savings, who are dependent on unemployment, who are dependent on stimulus checks. And this in turn means that those who are suffering the most are getting left behind, primarily because the federal unemployment booster ended at the end of July. So here's what the US Treasury Secretary had to say. He said, we're going to keep trying because it's too important for the American people. Mark Meadows and I have been holding daily calls with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate, and we've been keeping Kevin McCarthy and his team up to date. He said hopefully Mitch will enter new legislation next week. Now keep in mind, this is something that White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows alluded to as well. So we will see new legislation from the Senate next week. These are words from the two key White House negotiators, that we will see new legislation from the Senate next week. And he said, again, kids, jobs, liability protection for small businesses. As you know, there's still too many small businesses that have been hurt by this, and they have nothing, it was not their fault. Parts of the economy have opened up very quickly. Parts of the economy are still suffering. So let's look at what the US Treasury Secretary said. Let's roll the tape and listen in his own words.
Well, we're going to keep trying because it's too important for the American people. Mark Meadows and I have been hosting daily calls with Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate, and we've been keeping Kevin McCarthy and his team up to date. And hopefully Mitch will enter new legislation next week that, again, kids, jobs, liability protection for small businesses. As you know, there's still too many small businesses that have been hurt by this, have nothing to do with their own issue. Parts of the economy have opened very quickly. Parts of the economy are still suffering.
Now, keep in mind, a situation like this, an economic catastrophe, a pandemic, requires coordination between all aspects of government. Has the government been perfectly coordinated in their response to this pandemic? Absolutely not. In fact, I think no government could have been perfectly coordinated. But the one thing that US Treasury Secretary points out in the next segment, which I completely agree with, is that the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, has done an outstanding job with the moves he made. And he was asked specifically about his feedback pertaining to what the Federal Reserve Chairman has done. And this is what US Treasury Secretary said. He said, let me first say, I think that Chairman Powell and the entire Fed has done an extraordinary job in this crisis. And he said that we stood up an enormous amount of emergency facilities. That's part of the reason the economy is reopening the way it is. He said, I think the Fed's issue is that they've been trying to keep inflation up for a long period of time. There hasn't been that much inflation. And Mnuchin is talking about the recent comments from the Federal Reserve about their new approach towards inflation. So you've probably heard about that by now, but the Fed is essentially going to allow inflation to go up and down and not try and control it to the extent that they would have controlled it in the past. He said, I think that what they're saying makes common sense, that if you want to average 2% inflation, there'll be times when you run higher, when you run lower. What does this mean to you? This means that, let's say you're buying a gallon of milk. I don't know, I'm just going to throw out a number, $3. Next year, the gallon of milk is going to cost $3.10 maybe because of inflation. So inflation in a normal economy, in a healthy economy, as long as it's under control, is to be expected. That's just the way the system works over a period of time. You don't want inflation to go out of control. And on the other hand, you don't want deflation. So I'm not going to get into a very complicated discussion about inflation and deflation, but what the Federal Reserve is doing is trying to make sure that inflation stays normal. And this is an approach that the US Treasury Secretary supports. I support this as well. In fact, let me know in the comment section below what you think about inflation versus deflation, and if it's something you want me to cover on my channel in a little bit more detail. These are sophisticated macroeconomics that are important to maintain the health of an economy, to maintain the strength of the dollar, to maintain our purchasing power, and to maintain the balance of trade. So there are long-term implications here, but it's what I do appreciate, I just want to be clear, is that the US Treasury Secretary is supporting and acknowledging and providing support to the efforts of the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, because the two actually work very, very closely. And it is a fact that the two have worked hard to try and get the economy to reopen. And let's watch this video and let's roll the clip and see exactly what the US Treasury Secretary had to say.
First, say I think that Chairman Powell and the entire Fed has done an extraordinary job in this crisis, the COVID issues, and really working with Treasury. We've stood up an enormous amount of emergency facilities. That's part of the reason why we have the economy reopening the way we do. I think the Fed's issue is they've been trying to get inflation up for a long period of time. There hasn't been much inflation. I think what they're saying makes common sense, that if you want to average 2% inflation, there'll be times when you run higher and times you run lower.
So go ahead and type out in the comment section below and let me know what you think about Mnuchin's comments. Do you think that both House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are acting in bad faith? Let me know what are your thoughts about that. Let me also know whether you agree or disagree about the fact that some parts of the economy are open, whereas some parts of the economy are really going through, a lot of struggle. And number three, let me know if you agree with the Federal Reserve's approach towards inflation. I'd love to hear your comments. Also, if you learned something new from this video, because keep in mind, this is the thinking of the administration, and in any situation there are two sides to every story. It's very important for us to understand both sides of the story and then make our decisions about who we support, who we are going to vote for, because a lot of Senate seats are up for re-election in November, the presidential election. So we need to understand both sides of the story and then make responsible decisions. My advice to my viewers and subscribers would be, don't jump to a conclusion because of your preconceived notions. Think calmly, think rationally about both sides, and then make a decision and make whatever decision you want. For me, it's not about the red or the blue. It's about the red, white, and blue. I'm not Democrat. I'm not Republican. I'm American. By the way, I love this. This magnetic flag here. 100% made in America. I really love this. It's my new favorite. It's my new favorite thing to wear. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. My name is Dr. Chhoda with Ignition Time. If you don't know anything about me, check out my introductory video. I have the fortune, the honor, the privilege of living the American dream. I am a symbol of American exceptionalism. I'm a beneficiary of the generosity of this incredible country. Definitely check out my introductory video on our channel. We release videos at 2 p.m. East Coast time most days of the week. So make sure you click like, you subscribe, you enable notifications so you get instant updates about our videos going forward. Sometimes YouTube does not release the updates, so that happens. So what you can do is you can actually bookmark the page youtube.com/ignition time, bookmark it. So this way what happens is you can visit our channel once a day, every other day, and you can check out all the new videos we release. So you don't have to wait for the notifications. Speaking of notifications, what you can do is get your cell phone out, send a text message with the word ignition or with the word time to 70,000, that's 70000, and then you can get added to our SMS list. And you can also get added to our email alerts list if you go to ignitiontime.com/alerts. That's ignitiontime.com/alerts. You can opt out of our email list and our SMS list at any time. We are also on Instagram. Make sure to follow us on Instagram. That's instagram.com/ignition_time. That's our handle, ignition_time. That's our handle. So definitely make sure you follow us on Instagram, because we'll be releasing exclusive content for our Instagram followers. Thank you so much for watching. Please click like, please click subscribe, please enable notifications, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video of Ignition Time. Thank you. Bye.